Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Blind Techie Geek Speaks. I'm your host, Kathleen Mashana. Today, we're looking at something that connects a very modern parenting debate to some of the oldest questions in philosophy. The question being asked in graduate school is this: is true moral knowledge actually possible? And can we get there without the kind of supernatural answers that philosophers like Plato, Augustine, and Aquinas give us? Plato believed in a perfect world of forms that we somehow access through reason. Augustine and Aquinas rooted morality in God's law. But if we set those frameworks aside, are we all moral claims just opinions? Or is there another way to know what's right? This isn't just an abstract question. It matters when we look at real world situations, like how parents make decisions about technology and their children. I recently came across a really interesting story about Rachel Farquhar, a mother who decided to take iPads away from her toddlers completely. She noticed some behaviors she didn't like, so for 2 months before a family trip to Disney World, she removed the devices entirely. According to Farquhar, the changes were significant. Her kids had longer attention spans, fewer tantrums, more creativity, and she says they rediscovered the lost art of being bored. Her approach is to keep devices out of reach and replace them with hands-on activities like coloring, magnetic tiles, simple games. Her underlying claim is moral, that constant digital stimulation harms children's development and boredom is actually good for them. Conversation reminds me of something I came across from social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. After watching several of his interviews online, I learned that he uses the term digital pacifier to describe how smartphones and tablets instantly quiet children. He argues that while they work well to keep kids calm, they stop children from learning how to handle real world challenges. He talks about how this destroys boredom and tolerance. Children never learn to sit quietly or manage even 30 seconds of downtime without screaming for the device. I also came across Jean Tweng's book, 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. One of her rules links first smartphone access to driving age, specifically waiting until a child has their driver's license at 16 before handing them a phone. Now, I have to be honest about both of these perspectives. While I support many of Haidt's norms, no smartphones until high school, no social media until 16, phone-free schools, and more responsibility, independence, and free play in the real world, I think that calling phones and tablets digital pacifiers is super unrealistic. In my opinion, 20's driving license rule is particularly problematic. I am blind. I will never be able to drive. People with disabilities often have to rely on other forms of transportation to get where they need to go. A rule that ties smartphone access to driving ability simply doesn't account for this reality. I think the book should include modified rules that consider the needs of people with disabilities. For example, instead of linking smartphones to driving, the rule could focus on maturity, responsibility, and demonstrating readiness rather than a physical milestone that isn't accessible to everyone. I also believe that 20 should listen to Blind Techie Geek Speaks to understand how people with disabilities live. I received my first smartphone at 14 and waited until I was 19 to join social media. Before that, I had a flip phone for staying in touch with my family through calls. I think 14 is a more reasonable age for smartphones. 16 is going way too far. Technology has opened doors for persons with disabilities, that would otherwise be closed off to them. For me and for many others, technology isn't just about entertainment or social media. It's about independence. It's about studying. It's about staying connected. It's about participating fully in the world. I respect Farqua's commitment to her children, but I think her approach is too extreme, especially when you're talking about banning screens for the entire summer. As an online graduate student at Holy Apostles College and Seminary, pursuing my master's in philosophy, I use technology every day because I have to. As a blind student, my iPad and Braille computer aren't just optional. They're how I access my coursework, submit assignments, participate in discussions, and complete my program. Without them, graduate school would not be possible. I actually like going screen free on the weekends. It's good to disconnect, to step back and think, but doing it every single day, that's simply not reasonable. For Farqua's situation, I think there are better options than a total tech ban. Parents could use technology with their kids, set time limits, use parental controls, and guide children towards creative uses. For example, kids could use iPads under supervision to take photos, document what they're doing, and put together scrapbooks or memory books that they could share with their family. And years later, they could open the scrapbook and look back on some of the fun they had. That turns technology from something passive into something actually creative and meaningful instead. So, does Farquhar actually know that screens are bad, or is she just responding to what she's seeing in her own family? If we don't accept the metaphysical systems that traditional philosophers relied on, we have to work with evidence and practical judgment, what Aristotle called phronesis. Moral knowledge isn't about rigid rules that apply to everyone the same way. It's about figuring out the right balance in each situation. Farquhar's position of a total deprivation is one extreme, while unlimited screen time is the other. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Real moral knowledge has to be grounded in how people actually live. For me, as a blind graduate student, technology is a moral good because it makes education possible. For a young child, technology is a tool that needs boundaries, not something to be banned entirely. The mother's lifestyle raises real concerns about attention and overstimulation. But we should be careful about turning our moral views into rigid rules that don't account for different people's needs. There are important lessons here. First, moral knowledge requires humility, recognizing that what works for one family may not work for another. Second, technology is neither inherently good nor evil. It's a tool that requires wisdom in its application. Third, when we create rigid rules and guidelines, we must consider the diverse needs of all people, including those living with disabilities whose experiences differ from the norm. And finally, balance, not extremism, should guide our approach to making decisions in terms of parenting and technology use. The information for this podcast about Rachel Farquhar comes from the article Mom of Toddlers Shares Huge Behavioral Results 2 months after taking their iPads away, published by Upworthy, available at Upworthy.com. The perspective of Jonathan Haidt comes from various interviews I watched online, and the information about Jean Twenge comes from her book, 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. Thank you so much for joining me on Blind Techie Geek Speaks. Until next time!